You got John McMullen and Jody McDonald. Your Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. We are joined by longtime Eagle writer reporter Tommy Lawlor. His website, Eagles Blitz. That's IGGLES Blitz.com. He was all over this weekend, giving the upside, the downside. Yeah, much more upside to what the Eagles did during the draft. Howie Roseman did not miss too many targets this weekend. It's been great reading all weekend. I said, Tommy, we got to get you on so you can share all this with our viewers as well. Thank you very much for doing so. Are you A+? It comes down to this simple question, grading the Eagles draft. It's either an A or an A+. Are you going all the way to A+, or are you just going to go, well, I can't go too much over the top. I'll only give Howie Roseman an A.
If you factor in DeAndre Swift, I think it's definitely an A+. So
Yep.
Let's go that way.
And you got to factor in DeAndre Swift. I mean, you know, it's funny when Jody mentioned it on the show. Adam Schefter, I think, was the first one to report it. I got the alert on my phone at the NovaCare complex, and it was cut off. It just said DeAndre Swift. And I said, well, the Eagles got Swift. So I clicked on it. Eagles got Swift. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you heard me, Tommy, going off about some of these young general managers, but Howie has taken advantage of them, man. You know, at what point do they see 215, maybe 610, and they say, I don't know if I'm going to pick this up?
Well, part of it is the situation the Eagles are in, and that allows Howie to make moves from a position of strength. So last year when Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is available for a late round pick, he's able to make that pick and feel like, okay, he's coming into a locker room where the players will bring him in and they'll let him know the standard and they'll let him know what he needs to do. And Chauncey Gardner-Johnson did not have any issues during the season. You know, he had a few issues in New Orleans. You look at some of the general managers that passed on Jalen Carter, they're dealing with teams that weren't good last year, and they've got rosters that are a little more fragile. Do you want to bring a guy that's got the maturity problems Jalen Carter does in, and all of a sudden, the other thing, there'll be a lot of expectations there. Philadelphia, he comes in, he's not guaranteed to start. He's going to have to earn a starting role, and he'll have to answer to Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson. So he's got this veteran cast around him, and again, he comes in, there's no pressure on him. There'll be a lot of eyeballs, but nobody's looking at him as a savior. They're going to say, hey, Jordan Davis didn't start last year and we went to the freaking Super Bowl. All right, so you could be a backup this year and we can still be a good team. So it's a good situation that allows Howie to make the moves that he does. The other general managers are a little more desperate and can't take some of the chances he can.
And you also have an owner who not only backs him and any move that he wants to make, is willing to write checks like the check it took to get Jalen Hurts signed to his contract. That does make your job a lot easier. Howie's got a great owner who he's got a great relationship, which allows him a lot of flexibility to do the stuff that he wants to do. All right, we mentioned DeAndre Swift comes here again, a future pick, 2-year down the road pick they had to give up to get him, which is a stone cold steal if you ask me. But the running back room has officially gotten a little crowded. They bring back Boston Scott. They've already got Kenny Gainwell. They acquire Rashad Penny, who puts up great numbers but just can't stay healthy. DeAndre Swift, plus Trey Sermon, who at the owners' meetings this year, if you listen to the coach, it sounded like he was Canton-bound with how good he was in practice. That's 5 running backs, Tommy. I know the Eagles don't have a bell cow back. They don't want a bell cow back. They like the rotational aspect of the running back position. Too many? Are they going to make a move at running back, or just, hey, bring all these guys in and let them fight for their handoffs?
They're going to let them play. So this is running back by committee, right? There's not one guy that's going to have 250 carries, but we've got Penny, who has not stayed healthy throughout his NFL career. Kenny Gainwell has been a role player in his NFL career. DeAndre Swift, he's played most of the games he's been in, but he's not been a guy that consistently got 20 carries. And then Boston Scott clearly is a role player. So they're going to have all these guys. They're going to let them compete. And hey, listen, you don't know who's going to stay healthy through training camp, who's going to stay healthy through preseason. Injuries do happen, so you need 5 running backs to find 4, right? And so they're going to have these guys battle. And Trey Sermon, they keep talking about how much they like him, and that's great, but actions do speak louder than words. So if they were that high on him, they would have just stayed put at running back, but instead they went and got DeAndre Swift, which tells you they like Trey Sermon. They don't like him enough to say, okay, we're comfortable counting on you, right?
Yeah. Actions always speak louder than words, Tommy, as you mentioned. Last year it was, we love Tay Gowan. We love Kerry Vincent Jr. We love Mac McCain, even Zach McPherson. And all of a sudden, James Bradbury shows up. So it tells you, even the year before with Steve Nelson, it tells you that, some of that is lip service. But if Tommy Lawlor was a betting man, there's got to be a lead back. I don't even want to call it RB1 or whatever. Got to go with DeAndre Swift, odds on favorite, wouldn't you?
So I think you do go Swift as the lead back. And I think Penny is a guy that's got a lot of value, but they're going to probably try to be smart with him because when he does play, he's so valuable. But Seattle, which loves to feed the ball to running backs, if they're giving a guy 5 carries, they're giving him 18 carries. If you can mix him in for 10 carries, 12 carries, protect his legs, protect his lower body, and I think he's got real value in that sense. And Swift is a guy that has been more reliable and has stayed healthier, more durable. So that's a guy you probably feed the ball to more. But I think Penny's going to be important. And then we know Gainwell's their third down back. So all of those guys, I think, will have pretty clearly defined roles. And then Boston Scott will come out of his shell against the Giants 2 times a year. And, like a groundhog or something, he can go hide the rest of the year. And we'll just see what happens with Trey Sermon.
Tommy, 13 months ago, the Philadelphia Eagles had 0 players on their roster from the University of Georgia. They now have 6. They went from 0 to 6 in 13 months. And if you're going to jump on a bandwagon, you might as well make it the 2-time defending champion bandwagon, because that's what Georgia's accomplished. But is 6 guys from one college, and most of them teammates? DeAndre Swift, a couple of years older. He might only know the 2 guys that they drafted from last year, not the 3 rookies they brought in this year. Is that a little bit too much Bulldog overload?
No, I don't think so. They're getting good players at good value, right? If they were reaching and just taking Georgia players because they said we want Georgia players, then you'd have a point, because they're not bringing in the best guys. Well, Jalen Carter was the best player at pick 9. Nolan Smith was the best player at pick 30. Keely Ringo was the best player at pick whatever it was, 78, 79.
He was like 104. They got Kelly Ringo. Yeah.
Right. You're right. I'm sorry.
105. Yeah.
These guys were all good value at those spots, and they also fit the Eagles schemes, right? So they make sense. These are good additions, because it just so happens they went to Georgia together, but they all make sense. There's not anything being forced here. And as Howie Roseman joked around a few times this week, and he's a Florida guy, right? So he's hurting himself with his alma mater by bringing in all the Georgia guys.
Yeah. They were all fits. I mean, you're right, Tommy. I can't, George had some, Howie was asked, who's the scout for Georgia? And it's Bill Baya, who's, highly regarded by the organization. And, he's been promoted a bunch of times. Alan Wolking as well. But Howie said, hey, it's Georgia. I mean, that's not why they're good. They're good for other reasons. Right. And he told the story of when he was down there. Nick Sirianni, hey, who'd you like on defense? Everybody. I mean, it's not hard to see these guys are good players. Carter had the maturity issues, as you mentioned. Ringo has a shoulder issue. That's the reason he fell a little bit from talking to people around the league. But he was a bridge talent. A lot of people had him late first round, early second round. And Nolan Smith, Eagles would have taken him at 10 if Carter wasn't there. I believe that. They probably would have tried to trade down a little bit to 14, 15, somewhere in that range. But they thought really, really highly of Nolan Smith. But I will say the Alabama guys, if we go to this little cluster, right, it started with the Alabama guys, Devontae Smith and Landon Dickerson. Those guys are already stars. Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, we haven't seen it yet. We've seen a couple nice little developments. Nakobe got it, looked very instinctive and very limited snaps. Jordan Davis looked like he was coming on before the injury. And now we have the group this year. There's still promise, not certainty. There's certainty with Devontae Smith and Landon Dickerson. Any possible, we've been putting too much sweetener in the coffee this morning. Eagles are great. Eagles are great. Eagles are great. From the evaluation standpoint, any concern? Any of these guys doesn't live up to the billing long term.
History tells us that they're not all going to live up to it, right? I mean, the NFL draft is about failure. Most picks don't pan out the way you hope, right? For those guys that do, you know, we all look at Aaron Donald, undersized defensive tackle. Why didn't everybody draft him? Well, undersized defensive tackles mostly don't pan out. So we tend to look at the anomaly and say, oh, well, why don't more people do that? It's because the 50 guys before him didn't pan out. Yeah. Tom Brady, pick 199, Hall of Fame career. How come the 198 picks before that he didn't go? Well, you know, quarterbacks, you know, he just didn't jump out to people. He wasn't a dominant player at Michigan. He wasn't a special player. He became special in the NFL. So a lot of draft picks are going to fail, right? We know we've seen Jalen Reagor and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and on and on and on. And all these guys had great college careers. They weren't drafted high by the Eagles, and people said, oh my God, who are these guys? They were stars in college. And so there's risk with every draft pick you take. I think the Eagles made smart risks because Carter he was the most talented player in the draft. There's no question.
I agree with you.
He just had the issues, and that's what dropped him to 9. Nolan Smith was an incredibly talented player. He fell because he's got that awkward size at 6'2", 240. We saw him fall, and then we saw a Nick Herbig from Wisconsin fell from a possible second-round pick down to the 4th round. Same size. The NFL wants guys that are 250, 260 as pass rushers. Guys that are 240 pounds, they're not as keen on. So if you don't have the Eagles take you, then you might go for a little bit of a slide.
I like sorry, Tommy, I jumped in. Go ahead, finish, please.
I was just saying that there's risk with all these guys. There's no guarantees on anybody, but are they smart risks that feel like there's a good likelihood to succeed? I would say yes.
I like the fact that the Herbig brothers ended up together in Pittsburgh, following in the Watt footsteps. I was a Herbig fan. I knew as soon as the Eagles took Smith, then there was no chance they were taking Herbig because they're similar type players. Eagles got the better of the two, but I'm a fan of both of the two Herbigs. Sidney Brown, 3rd round pick. I think value there as well. How we got value with every single pick that he made, but he's a rookie. And last year you had Nakobe Dean, who was a 3rd round pick, and he just couldn't get on the field. And Jonathan Gannon kept saying, why would I take Kaiser White or Edwards off the field when all they do is their job on every single play? All right, I get it. But you're also trying to develop your young player. And as John just said, we don't know what Nakobe Dean's going to be. We hope, we think, we project, but we don't know because we didn't see it. The one game he did play in, decent number of snaps, he actually made 6 tackles in a short period of time. And I could go back in 2020 hindsight, critique Jonathan Gannon. You couldn't get him on the field more often. The Eagles had some blowout wins last year that he could have gotten some snaps, but they didn't. Here's my question on Brown this year. Can he jump right in and start week 1? Will the Eagles give him that availability? New DC, but the same head coach. Is he going to have to flat out outplay the safeties who have more experience than him? Is it going to be a wide open competition? May the best man win, resume to the side? How much do you think Sidney Brown can contribute for the Eagles week 1 of this upcoming season?
Well, I think every coach's responsibility is to put the best players on the field. And so you don't just say, oh, you're a 3rd round pick and Reed Blankenship, you're an undrafted player, so we're going to play the 3rd round pick. You say, hey, who's the better player? Now, if the Eagles were coming off a 2-win season and had a marginal roster, then maybe say, you know what, we're going to keep one eye on the future. Let's get the guys we believe in long-term out there to play. The Eagles, clearly, they're coming off a Super Bowl performance. So they want to compete. They need the best players on the field. And if Sidney Brown could be one of those players, if you think about the best safeties in the Eagles in the last 30 years. Obviously, the first guy is Brian Dawkins. And Brian was a terrific player, but he also was a very emotional, fiery guy that brought a real presence to the field. You call him a tone setter. The next safety that you think of would be Malcolm Jenkins, a fiery leader with some emotion. And again, you call him a tone setter. That's Sidney Brown. You know, you watch that dude play and his hair is on fire, 100 miles an hour the whole game. He will run through a brick wall if he thought it would help the team. And I think the energy and the juice he's going to bring to the field, that stuff can be infectious. So I think he's a guy that the coaches are going to love. I think there's a good chance that he gets on the field right away. You know, he's got to earn it. But when you watch what he did last year, 6 interceptions for Illinois, goes to the Senior Bowl, plays well, has a phenomenal combine. I mean, the guy runs 4.47, jumps 40 inches. So the physical ability's there. Obviously, a smart guy, played in a quality defense at Illinois, made plays. He's the complete package. The only reason he lasted as long as he did, he's not as big as some people would like. At 5'10", 211, he's got the thickness, but people might like a little bit more length. And that's one of the reasons I wasn't sure if the Eagles would go for him. But they obviously, you know, how we talked about him being a red star player. They think he's going to be a leader and a presence on and off the field. So this is an interesting guy, and I think he definitely has a chance to start as a rookie.
Yeah, you mentioned how he broke out that red star player. Everybody knows blue chip, red flag, but they don't know red star. To my knowledge, that's the first time he's talked about it.
First time I've heard it.
Yeah. And basically it's from his description, Tommy, it's what you kind of described. It's the intangibles. So we asked him, how many red stars he got in a given year? And he said about 10. They're not always first round picks. They could be 7th round picks. But he described them as passion players for the organization. And Brown is one of them. So that was kind of eye-opening. And I do think they want to get him on the field. And I was thinking about this overnight because Jody and I were talking about, there's one glaring just weakness on this team, and it's all ball linebacker, and they didn't address it. They don't seem to care about it, and for the most part, it's a devalued position. For the most part, I agree with them. Same with running back, but they pay attention in running back. You know, they pick up Swift. They try to get Rashad Penny back and going in the right direction. At linebacker, it's Nicholas Morrow, who they didn't pay 1 cent of guaranteed money to. And I'm starting to think, and there's still plenty of time, May 1st came and now nobody counts against the comp pick formula. So if there's a veteran linebacker, he doesn't have to worry about that. He can bring him in. June 1st cuts are coming up. We know with CJ Gardner-Johnson, there could be a trade in training camp. But if they got to go to war with what they have now, I'm starting to think you're going to see a lot of big nickel, a lot of Sidney Brown, a lot of Reed Blankenship, a lot of Terrell Edmonds on the field at the same time in obvious passing situations. Your thoughts?
That's possible. Edmonds is, 6'1", 217, I think, is measurements. So if you played him down in that linebacker role, that's somewhere he'd be comfortable with, and put Brown and Blankenship on the back end of the defense, you could do something like that. I think one of the problems with linebacker this year, there just weren't good people.
Don't tell that to Detroit.
Yeah, right. I stand corrected. I was shocked that they didn't make more of a push to keep TJ Edwards. But then, he didn't exactly line it up in a Super Bowl, right? So you sit there and you say, was he an ideal long-term fit at the money they were going to pay for him, or could they find somebody better? And they may have felt like, listen, we don't want to invest that money in him. He's a good player. We loved him, but we loved him cheap. We didn't love him at that price. And the draft was just weak for linebackers. People would say, hey, who do you want the Eagles to take? And I'm like, there's not a lot of guys, right? Jack Campbell was far and away the best linebacker, and he went way early. Yeah. So they just wasn't a good group. There are going to be some guys available. We saw yesterday the Ravens didn't do the 5th-year option for Patrick Queen, so possibly he's available in a trade. There's going to be some players, some linebacker is going to emerge for some team, and maybe make a veteran expendable. So Howie will keep looking around. There's no question they don't value linebacker like they do other positions. But again, one of the reasons they didn't do much on it this year, there just weren't good options, and there wasn't a whole lot in free agency. There wasn't a whole lot in the draft. So they just didn't have much to work with. And Georgia does have a good linebacker that's probably going to be draft eligible this upcoming year. Maybe
they're not taking them. They're not maybe in the third round.
That'll be the test. Do they spend a high pick on a Georgia linebacker? So we'll see what happens. But I do think Nick Morrow, is better than some people think. Is he a good player? No, let's not sugarcoat. He's not a good player. But the Eagles wouldn't have signed him if they didn't think he could at least be an effective starter. And I think he can do that. If you play him in the middle, he's not as good. You play him in the weak side, and he's a little bit more comfortable when he's out in space.
If the Eagles are going to be using 6 or 7 defensive backs for certain sets this year, Jordan Davis better be eating up 3 blockers because you're going to need to spring some of those guys to get clean to running backs rather than block encumbered. So, again, I think they're underestimating linebacker. And got it written down right here on my show sheet, Patrick Queen here today. I like the guy a lot. I liked him in the draft a couple of years ago. Last year, he had over 100 tackles, had 5 sacks for the Ravens. Now, I get it why they didn't pick up the option on him. It would have been $12 million. And in case you hadn't noticed, no one's paying linebackers $12 million in the National Football League. It just doesn't exist. We can question the Eagles about the way they use and value linebacker all we want. The whole league is trending in that direction, except for the Chicago Bears.
I got to disagree with you now.
Go ahead.
The Ravens brought in Roquan Smith, and they're paying him $18 million a year.
Yeah. Well, and the Bears.
Well, then did you think that there was a prayer that Patrick Queen was getting 12? If they're paying Roquan that, do you think they're going to pay Patrick Queen 12 on top of that?
No. So that's my point. Is that the teams will pay. They're not going to pay 2 linebackers, right?
No.
So Patrick Queen became expendable because he wasn't as good as Roquan Smith. Obviously they saw Patrick Queen as a solid starter, but not a guy that they felt like they wanted to build their defense around. Roquan Smith, they felt like it's a guy they could build their defense around. So
the Bears played 2. Again, I'm picking on the Bears, Tom. They paid 2. Knuckleheads.
Well, that's Matt Eberflus. If you look at his defenses, they need
DJ Edwards didn't get what Patrick Queen money was supposed to be. He didn't get 12, John. He got 6.
6.5.
Right.
But that's a lot for a second linebacker. That is a lot for a second
linebacker. Not
the
12 that Patrick Queen was scheduled to make, and that's why they didn't pick up the option for the 5th year, because they would have been in $30 million.
No, well, and that's why the Ravens are generally a smart organization. They've taken some hits because of what went on with Lamar, but obviously that worked out in the end. I will say this about Nicholas Morrow, Tommy, and this concerns me. Not that all contracts are the be-all, end-all, but not 1 red cent of guaranteed money for a veteran player. That scares the living you-know-what out of me. I mean, people would talk about Rashad Penny. They gave him $600,000 guaranteed, and you can just move on, right? We were saying that, if it doesn't work out, just move on. They didn't give Nicholas Morrow a penny of guaranteed money, and so that scares me.
And John's right. The thing about Morrow is he played every defensive snap for the Bears. At least Penny, you understand why they were able to get him done without giving him much guaranteed money, because he's always missing games. Morrow plays every snap, and he couldn't get 1 guaranteed dollar. John's exactly right. It tells you the rest of the National Football League were like, we'll be going somewhere else at linebacker. And the Eagles kind of said, can we get him that cheap? Then, we'll give him a contract. It doesn't bode confidence coming into the season. I'm with John 100% on this one.
No, so you talked about Howie taking advantage of other general managers.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Here's a case of Howie taking advantage of a player. So he sits there and he sees there's no market for Nick Morrow, right? Teams are not making offers to him. So Howie says, hey, listen, here's what we'll pay you. We're not going to give you money. That gives Howie the flexibility that if Patrick Queen does become available, Howie goes and trades for Patrick Queen. He can cut Nick Morrow, or he could keep Nick Morrow as a backup. And he's not paying him a lot of money, and he's got no money invested in him in terms of a bonus. So if they did cut him, they did move on from him, they don't lose anything. So it's Howie trying to take advantage of a situation, saying, there's a player, we don't love him. They're not going to tell you they love him. They know what his issues are, but they say, hey, this guy could be effective, and he gives us flexibility that if another player does come available, we can make a move, and we don't have to undo this move we've done with him. Like I'm telling you, Howie just didn't have great options. He tried to make the best of a bad situation, and he's hoping to see is something else available. And really, this is kind of a Ravens type move. The Ravens have been a great organization over the years because they've always been patient. If they didn't see a player that they wanted to go after, rather than sign the next guy, put him in and say, all right, well, we'll marry somebody we really don't love, they would say, we're just going to wait. And if we don't find that guy before the season or even during the season, we're willing to go with the young guys we have on our roster. They may not be ideal, but they'll be effective, and we'll find a solution we do believe in the future. And it's a little bit of, you're sitting there playing poker, right? You got to be willing to lose, and Howie's taking that chance. So we'll see if somebody coughs up a linebacker in the next couple of months. If not, it could be Morrow and Dean.
Yeah. At Lawlor NFL, make sure you follow Tommy on Twitter. I'll end it here. Eagles Blitz, IGGLES, blitz.com. You can read Tommy there. Did a tremendous job on all this draft stuff. The quarterback factory, baby, day 3. And they went throwback. They got a throwback line. I think a lot of people, Tommy, were uber focused on, the Eagles got Marcus Mariota to be the backup so they don't have to change the offense. I don't think it was about that. I think they just liked a veteran guy. Nick Sirianni is always, and I tell Jody, Nick Sirianni can't stop talking about Phillip Rivers, loves the guy.
Right.
He can't move at all. Tanner McKee is a 6'6", old school pocket passer. Very different from even Ian Book, the current developmental prospect who can do a little read option, zone read stuff as well, some mobility. Did it surprise you that they did the 180 and brought in the big, strong arm pocket passer?
I was surprised by that. Yeah, when I was doing my pre-draft research, you focused on the kid from UCLA, Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
Yeah.
That's a guy they expressed interest in, and real good athlete. And they looked at some other quarterbacks that had pretty solid mobility. Tanner McKee was completely off my radar. Now, I knew who he was, what have you, but I just didn't associate him with the Eagles. And it was a little surprise. But it tells you that Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman were trying to find a quarterback they liked and not just a type. And that's what's important. The player is more important than the exact skill set, because do you want a guy that's got good mobility but can't throw the football, isn't smart, all those things, or do you want a guy that has the overall package? And Nick Sirianni's offense has worked, as you're pointing out, with Phillip Rivers, right? Now, that was in Indianapolis and San Diego, but he's been able to have success with this offense in other places and in other ways. So Tanner McKee ran a lot of RPOs at Stanford, so he'll be used to that part of the game. He's an accurate passer, makes good decisions, and I could see where the Eagles liked him. It is funny going back and thinking about Nick Foles. Nick Foles played on a bad Arizona team and would take a beating and would stand in the pocket and throw. He had one receiver that was good, so he'd wait for that one dude to get open. He'd throw in the ball. And he just took a beating and proved how tough he was. So I started watching Stanford, and, you watch a game against USC. Well, Tanner McKee's got a clean pocket. He's throwing the ball, doing some nice things. Then you put on the Washington game. He was sacked 3 of the first 5 plays, I think it was, and just took a beating all game long. But he sat there in the pocket, and he was throwing the ball to number 81. I don't know who that kid is. He's throwing a ball to him left and right and making some nice plays. And I'm having flashbacks to watching Nick Foles on a crappy Pac-12 team, getting his butt kicked, but still showing toughness, standing there in the pocket and making those throws. So different coaching staff, whatever else. You got Howie who's around from the old days, but it's hard not to have a few Nick Foles flashbacks watching that situation.
Yeah, I went there yesterday too. The comparison between Wentz, Foles, and Hurts and Tanner McKee. I'm not going as far as he's coming off the bench to win the Super Bowl, but there is a comparison to be made between what used to be and what is for the Eagles coming up this year. All right, last one from me, Tommy. Joseph Nagata free agent, undrafted guy they signed from Clemson. Will he be replacing Quez Watkins as the number 3 wide receiver, Zach Pascal as the number 4 wide receiver, because the kid's got size, and maybe they asked him to become the quote-unquote blocking wide receiver? Does he replace Greg Ward as a practice squad Philadelphia Eagle, or does he replace the guy who's shagging balls down on some golf course in South Carolina, Hilton Head, out there shagging balls? What do you think Joseph Nagata does for the Philadelphia Eagles and or anyone else as an undrafted free agent?
He's not going to be taking Quez Watkins' job unless Quez just completely melts down on us. But yeah, you guys, 6'3", 217 pounds. He ran pretty well. He jumped 34.5 inches, so he's got speed. He's got some explosion. He just doesn't have great body control, and that's a critical factor for wide receivers. That allows you to make cuts, get open, get separation. He doesn't get a lot of separation from corners. Now, the upside of that is he's 6'3", 217 and can go up and get the football. You don't have to have a lot of separation. If you're a big physical receiver, you can kind of body up on the corner and make those catches. He's got good hands. So I think he has a legitimate shot to make the roster. I would not say that he is likely to make the roster, and I don't see him making much of an impact this year. He wasn't a volume receiver at Clemson. I think he caught 80 career passes. So this is not a guy that's an All-American and put up all kinds of crazy numbers. Yeah, he played at Clemson when they didn't have a good quarterback situation. That affected him, and he finished the season well when they played a different guy. And then he obviously played well in I guess it was the East-West Shrine game, I think. And so the physical ability's there. He just needs some work. But he's a good UDFA for the Eagles to bring in and develop, and I like his size. And a guy he can learn from is A.J. Brown, a big physical receiver who knows how to use his tools and take advantage of that size. So,
by the way, Tommy, I missed on DJ. Help me out, Jody. How do you say his last name?
DJ Uiagalelei.
Yeah. Man, I thought he was going to be good.
Same here.
Everybody, Dabo Sweeney missed on him.
Yeah.
He was in the ACC championship. They had him drop back, and the first pass bounced to the receiver in the flat. And they benched him the next series. And you just could tell the kid had just zero confidence.
Yeah.
So we'll see. He's
he transferred. Where did he transfer to?
He transferred. Where'd he go? Oregon State. Yeah. Oh, I forgot to ask. Who you got? Zettner, Ty Zettner, or Aaron Cepas?
I'm gonna go with Zettner. I mean, let's go with the kid. Cepas has killed the team 2 years in a row in the playoffs. So let's give the kid a chance.
Yeah.
Tommy, great stuff. We appreciate it. Whenever you jump into the mix, again, check out his website, Eagles Blitz, IGGLES Blitz.com. Lots of stuff about the draft there if you want to go back and check it out. Thanks for sharing with us today here, bud.
Fun to talk to you guys.
You got it. We'll come back. Johnny Mac, Jody Mac. Yeah, DJ Uwe.
I thought he was going to be unbelievable.
I said he would be the number 1 pick in the draft, not this past year, but for next year, 2024. Yeah. I had him pegged to be the number 1 pick in the draft in the 2024 draft.
Tommy's right, man. Confidence, it is amazing when you lose your confidence. And there's a guy, he might even turn it around at Oregon State. He's got so much talent, and he just lost it. Who knows? Well, we talked about Spencer Rattler all the time. Same type of thing.
Yeah, but I never liked Rattler. I thought,
but a lot of people had him at the top of the draft.
All hype, all media. I just never saw it, so I was not surprised.
Well, I'm with you. I'm
taking that one in the win column because some people thought he was going to be number 1 pick in the draft, but not for me. Oh, I had DJ Uiagalelei as the number 1.
I was concerned about learning his name. I'm like, I got to learn this name. No,
I learned it. Not that I'll be using it all that much. Those Oregon State highlights I'll be doing on CBS Sports Radio at 1:00 in the morning. I hope that's the case because, he was the game he played against Notre Dame as a freshman for Clemson when Lawrence went down. It was like, Trevor who? This kid's just as good. And then, just no progress to his game whatsoever. All right, Johnny Mac, Jody Mac, come back. I'm going to make the argument for Patrick Queen. This is right up Howie's alley. Another team showing their hand, jump into the lurch, take advantage. I know it flies in the face of general Eagle ways of doing things and the value that they put on positions. But if you could get him during this next couple of weeks and the price I think it's going to cost, we'll talk about Patrick Queen of the Ravens potentially coming to the Eagles as a linebacker here next on Birds 365.